hope so. I've always had a bit of trouble with Hollywood and the way that they do things. You know, I guess all writers say that, but the great thing about the Oscar is that it maybe it gives you a little more freedom, you know, to have people trust you, because so much of the profession is just asking people to trust you. You know, like even with Argo, I'd written lots of, as Julissa knows, I'd written lots of scripts, and some of them had almost been made, but until you have one that's actually made and makes some money, people kind of, they're not eager to give you opportunities, and so I hope it does and gives me more freedom to just do other things. I mean, I like writing really small movies, you know. I mean, if I could write anything, I'd probably write very, very, you know, it's great also to work on a big canvas and to have a lot of money from Warner Brothers to stage big scenes. But I hope that Oscar helps to, you know, just to have people listen to me, because that's the most important thing, right, in all the arts, is to just get somebody to listen to you, to give you a chance. This actually, what happened was I had written a little movie in New York, a little independent movie for a company that closed, and but my friend who worked at the company that closed, and so, you know, the script was killed, and that happens a lot in movies, that you'll write a script and then maybe they lose the money or the company goes out of business or whatever. So I'd written a script based on a play in New York, and then the company closed, but I had a friend who I had made a friend at the company, this girl named Nina, woman named Nina, and Nina's next job was to work with George Clooney at his production company. So Nina had said, we're going to work on something, we're going to do something else together, you know, we're going to do something, but we didn't know what it would be, and I was still writing, and then finally there was an article in a magazine which was about the Argo operation, but they didn't know what the movie might be. They didn't know if it was more of a comedy, if it was more like Syriana, if it was more like, you know, there were lots and lots of movies that they thought this could be, and so they said, Nina said, well, can you come up with ideas for what you think the movie might feel like and sound like? So I went off and worked, and I really like movies of the 70s. You know, like the late 70s. It was a really good moment for American movies, and probably there hasn't been a moment so good since then in American movies. And it interested me that this operation was classified until, you know, 1997, and it was declassified by President Clinton. So I thought, what if it had not been classified? And what if, you know, in 1979, 1980, some really good director had been able to make this movie? So that was the idea that I went back to them with. I said, I think it should have muchas palabras, you know, because people talk in those movies, you know, and it could be down and a little bit dirty, you know, and not glossy. And if it was the CIA, it would not be the version of CIA that you see in the Bourne movies, you know, the Matt Damon Bourne movies. Right. It would be a much more sort of all the president's men, you know. And so I went back and sort of, you know, blah 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 for, you know, half an hour, and told them, and I thought, well, I screwed that up because, you know, and then Nina went back to California, and she told George Clooney and his partner Grant what I'd said, and they seemed to be interested, so they asked me to write up these ideas and to develop the story a bit more, and I did. And then one day they called and they said, okay, you got the job. I think the main obstacle was how much can you fictionalize and how much not, because, you know, and I'm not sure that I ever got it right. You know, I may have done some things wrong in trying to figure out what you can change and what has to stay the same. You know, there was that, and then there was the fact that well, it's an interesting moment in American history, right? America had dirty hands at this moment, right? The CIA, all that stuff. Like, the CIA was not sorry, embajadora, pero she's what she. But the CIA, as you see at the beginning of the movie, had done some very sketchy things in Iran, right? I mean, just like around the world, they did. It's just a fact. And yet, here was an episode in which a CIA officer, I think, did something for once genuinely good. These people were not spies. The six, they were not. There might have been other people there that were spies, but these six people certainly were not engaged in any sketchy activity. I think, I know. So, they were stamping passports and doing visas. So here you have a moment when, it's a bit of a redemption moment for this man in the CIA who has not always done good things. You see in the movie when they're at Hagia Sophia in Turkey, the British intelligence officer says, we've been ferrying out the torture apparatus of our friends, right? And so what was difficult for me was trying to get the balance of trying to suggest that there's a dark past, but also to try to say, here's a moment where this man did something good for six people, right? And then the other thing is to place it in a post-colonial context, right? Because Iran was a post-colonial strategic place, and that happened at the beginning of the film in the prologue. And then also to try to find a way to have at least a couple, to show that there are Iranian characters who are complex and who have lives and are not just crazy bad guys. There are some crazy bad guys in the movie, no doubt. I wish there were fewer, probably. There are crazy bad guys with guns, but there were, in real life. It was very scary. In any revolution, it's very scary, right? To see a society in chaos is a very scary thing. But finding a few ways to try to say that these are human beings with complicated stories, and yet do that as an American filmmaker was very hard. So there's a character in the movie who became my favorite character named Sahar, who's the housekeeper, the maid. And she, for me, became the soul of the film because she's not a political person. She doesn't care what the government is, but she is faced with this decision that she suffers because of, right? Yep. And she has to leave the country. And she was based on real people. There were 3 real people, real housekeepers in that embassy, in that residence that had to flee. Well, I spent about 9 months doing research, and as Julissa knows, because she had to deal with a crazy person on the phone. Like, oh my God, I've just watched 12 hours of news broadcasts or whatever. So there was a lot of that. But the interesting thing about the research was that this was one of the first crises, the first situations, first crisis in the world where there was a lot of news footage that was live. Because satellites were new. CNN was about to start in 1980. CNN started. So this hostage crisis, maybe some people remember. I mean, most of you are too young, but the hostage. I mean, I also was not old enough to really remember it. But the hostage crisis was the first world crisis, I think, where there was live satellite news constantly on television, and all that television footage exists. Right? That still exists. So I felt that I not only needed to read everything that I could read, but I needed to watch these images. Because in the film, there are always televisions on in the film, right? And there's archive footage, there's news footage, and sometimes in a movie, you use a television to just cheat, to give the audience information, right? How many times you're watching a movie and the newscaster tells you something you need to know, right? So there's that, and the news footage does do that. It does give you exposition in the story. But the news footage also had to be part of the story, which is to say that the Iranian students, they know that they have to manipulate the news to manipulate public opinion, right? And then the CIA officer, Tony, he also knows that he needs to manipulate the images. And that became really important for me in the research, because I felt that there's a scene in the film where there's a press conference, and Tehran Mary, or the sort of propaganda woman for the Iranians, is speaking, and then there's Tony Mendez, and it's cut together, and he's also having a press event, and here are 2 competing pianos, right, and trying to get attention, and that to me became the essence of the film, which is to try to solve this problem using the media spectacle, right, that the Iranians are using on their side, and therefore does it without violence, but trying to use, the game, trying to play the game and use creativity. Because the Iranians were creative on their side. I mean, the students, they were very, very smart about how they used the media. They would do things like, they had a moment where they said, we're going to release all the black hostages, all the African-American hostages, you can go. Because they thought that would be a good gesture, right? Because you've been oppressed by the United States, and we're in solidarity with you, and you can go. They released women at a certain point, and that also brought some positive attention. Anyway, they were, and actually, I think that the students, many of them were idealists and had good intentions. But I think that their sit-in, their protest, was very, very quickly taken over by the Ayatollahs and the hardliners, and so it became cynical in the way that so many revolutions are, right? A revolution is started by idealists and it ends with the cynics who take over the revolution. But anyway, I'm meandering around the question,
Fascinating.
but yeah, so lots of research. The research was what took the longest.